Yeah, so again, thanks everyone for joining us this Friday morning. Um, this session will be recorded. You can go watch it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And you can also see all the past recordings. If you missed those as well, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the AI Roundtable discussion series there. Today, I have two special guests. I have Dr. Johan Thiel. He's a professor at City Tech CUNY. He is a professor of mathematics at the New York City College of Technology in Brooklyn, New York. Dr. Thiel completed his PhD in 2011 at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign under the supervision of A.J. Hildenbrand. Before joining City Tech, Dr. Thiel worked at the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York for 2 years. His main research interests are in number theory. And then we have Victoria Mullaney Brown from Columbia University. Dr. Victoria Mullaney Brown is the inaugural Director of Academic Integrity at Columbia University, where she leads an undergraduate integrity program and teaches success strategies for academia. She is the founder of VMB Coaching and Consulting. She is an author, educator, and former president of the Critical Mixed Race Studies Association with expertise in social justice education. She has co-edited books, published a monograph, and 12 DEI-focused articles, and uses coaching to help individuals thrive authentically. A qualitative and mixed methods researcher, Dr. Mullaney Brown earned her PhD and Master's in Educational Policy from UMass Amherst and a BA in English Spanish from Skidmore College. She also partners with parent groups and nonprofit schools and businesses to design race conscious and equity-driven learning programs. So we have a really awesome program for you today. We're gonna go straight at academic integrity and what's happening with Gen AI. We all have seen how quick the technology has been moving. It's every day something new is happening, and so at the trenches is academic integrity, as we all know. And so these are our leaders in our institutions who handle the tough choices and decisions that have to be made when what happens when students don't follow the rules, or what are best practices and strategies to help our institutions as we move forward with this technology that is just quickly um, pulling the rug under our feet. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria and Johan to start the conversation. And maybe Victoria or Johan, can you talk about a little bit about in your space, uh, what are some of the things that you're doing in your space regarding generative AI?
Sure. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, you kick us off.
Okay. Good. Well, first of all, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. So here at City Tech, I'm the Academic Integrity Officer. I took over for Kyle Cordileone. So my main duties as the Academic Integrity Officer is being the point person for people at City Tech that are reporting incidences of academic integrity violations. So one of the things that I thought about doing later on today for those of you that are from City Tech is we can go over the process here in case you are unaware of how it works, or you have questions about what happens to students that go through it. So mainly my job for now is sort of handling the paperwork, making sure that I contact the students, that I let them know what kind of what the situation is, what their options are, if they plan on appealing, what that process is like, and then possible outcomes. So I would say that for now, one of the big things that I try to do is make sure that when I talk to faculty and students, that they're aware of the process and outcomes, and so that students really understand what they're going through. In the future, I hope to have more time to work on sort of more preventative things and deal with generative AI sort of at the beginning rather than when an outcome like this has already occurred. And there are plenty of initiatives, and Jose, you're part of those, right? When we're talking about things like simple syllabus and giving faculty members options on what to put on their syllabus to be very clear about things. So I think there's a lot of efforts that are sort of in the works, and I think they're leading to a good place. But for now, most of the time, I'm usually dealing with the outcome of a student being charged with an academic integrity violation. So, Victoria, if you want to take over.
Sure. I'll give a little bit of background, I think, Jose, before I answer the GenAI question. So hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. I understand we have a mixed group of folks, both faculty, students perhaps as well, and some administrators. So it's nice to meet you, and thanks for inviting me, Jose and Johan, into this conversation this morning. You know, we're both here in Manhattan, you know, different institutions having the support of really all of our students and staff and faculty. So as Jose mentioned, I've been at Columbia now for almost 8 years, and in the role, when I started in 2018, it really was to help broaden preventative education for our undergraduates here. We had just pretty much one too many cases of academic dishonesty, and I think our college deans, which were structured a little differently, really decided that they wanted to create a position that would focus specifically on this issue. And the best practice is to have somebody at the institution dedicated towards promoting academic integrity. And so I was, you know, took on the charge, I guess, to really begin this work. And it's complicated work. It's never easy. And I think even this conversation is complicated today. It's academic integrity work is very gray. It's not black or white. It's kind of in the mix, right? There's never a clear, straight response, even when you may be concerned or suspect an issue if you're teaching, or whether you're a student and you're brought up against some allegations. It's these aren't easy conversations. I think that's one thing I wanted to start with, is like, these are difficult conversations in academia. But at its heart, I think they're worth having, and it's worth figuring out the best ways that your institution can thrive in supporting students through what are difficult conversations. So I wanted to lead with just dropping in the chat my website, which is a constant iterative kind of process. It's something that I'm always trying to figure out how to better, improve its message. But ultimately, what you'll find on the site are just a couple of different categories of information. So a little bit different than Johan's position. I focus on like the preventative side of academic integrity with workshops, with orientation programming. And yes, I intersect with students who are found responsible for the disciplinary process, but it's not the only thing that I focus on. So a lot of it is proactive, but I also do a lot of support. So yeah, I think I leave it there. And then we can kind of continue on with the GenAI question, if that sounds good. Oh, Jose, you're muted. Yeah.
Oops, sorry about that. At City Tech, and Johan, you can talk a little bit about how having some type of guide for students, maybe or faculty members as well, on providing guidance for how to approach a situation where a student is using GenAI when on the syllabus itself says, no use of, the rules are not to use GenAI in the class, and the student is caught cheating or using the tool, the procedures in place, and I think one thing that Johan mentioned is that's something that we at City Tech are working. We have an AI task force. Some members are in this room now. I see Shelley Smith is, part of that group. But as this tool it's so quickly moving into our territory, we have to quickly arm ourselves and create these guidelines, and even policies, right, within the CUNYverse. And so I just wanted to maybe touch on how can what you see, Victoria, at Columbia and us at City Tech, what are some of the policies, and also not only policies, but also the guidance that you provide? I know you do workshops, and for us, we put together a little handbook for our students and our faculty, just to have some expectations of what happens when certain things don't go the right way, so that everyone understands that there is a policy in place, that best practices, and where do you go to for help? And so that I think is a question that we're all trying to figure out as the technology continues to change and it just becomes more ubiquitous.
Mhm.
Either one, Johan or Victor.
Sure, I can go for it. All right, so I mean, I've been the point person for some of these questions now during the semester, particularly from faculty from my department that know that I'm in this position. But I do reach out to other groups and have been trying to be in contact with other departments to figure out what are the kinds of things that they're doing so I can give better answers down the line. I've been talking to student affairs about what kind of things faculty members can do that aren't, for example, too invasive in terms of like verifying that students aren't cheating. I've gone to a present. It also just depends on what your department is. So I'm come from the math department, where I think a lot of the times what I'm focused on in class is making sure that a student isn't cheating during an exam. Whereas this is very different for some of the other departments that I've talked to, like philosophy or some of these other departments that have a lot of heavy writing courses that are asynchronous. So what to do there is very challenging and different from what I'm usually doing to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen in my class. If you want to talk about like actual process for faculty members at City Tech, there is a form called the FAR form, the Faculty Action Report form, which is a 2-page form. It's fairly short that you fill out and it gets forwarded to me. And from that point on, I usually take over. And most of the time, faculty members don't have to do anything additional unless there's an appeal. And it's very rare that students appeal. Most of the time, faculty members have sort of gathered enough information that students will say, yeah, okay, I did do that. But there are questions about what do we do in the case of the use of AI to generate papers. And there are several other institutions that I think have a pretty good policy of not accepting only things like Turnitin as evidence, right? Because there are false positives, and I refuse to accuse a student on a single number if there's a false positive. That I think would be the worst thing that could happen. So I'm willing to let things slide for one or two for some people if it means not getting a false positive. And so I recommend that in those situations, faculty members have to bring more than just a simple number from something like a tool that like Turnitin. But there's still a lot of unknowns and a lot of hard questions and few answers that we need to discuss. So I want to hear from departments and the kinds of things that they're doing so we can kind of put together maybe a more coherent policy.
I think from my side, I mean, thinking about what you just shared too, I often think about this era of like living now in artificial intelligence and its intersection into academia. Like it wasn't something we asked for. Let's be honest, we didn't ask for artificial intelligence to come and disrupt our educational system that we were all very happy and content working in. But nonetheless, it's here and it's only going to continue. And so one of my campus partners that I work closely with really connects this issue as a teaching and learning issue, right? And so the Center for Teaching and Learning is a close campus partner of mine that guides a lot of this conversation. And they've just this past month unveiled a new website where they're trying to pull together like components around how do we, as people who are instructors, learn the technology to make a decision around how do I want to adapt how I teach to include this technology or to exclude it? And how do I create an experience for students that is still in its authenticity of kind of how I was trained or how I want to teach and the message I want to teach? Because Johan and I, in conversation with getting prepared for this conversation this morning, we were discussing like it's personal to teach. It really is. It's not something that I think a lot of us realize. It's an extension of what we're known for, what we've become experts on. You just know so much about the content and it's personal. And so when there are allegations of dishonesty, it hurts. I think it hurts people's emotions and feelings. And it's also really hard for faculty sometimes to report. There's sometimes lots of fear around, will I destroy the student's future if I even report an allegation? And so from my side, at least working with students at my institution, of course, there's that fear. And again, I can't ever force anybody to report anything they don't want to report. The hope is that in working in higher ed and then also being educators, as every one of us are, and if you're a student, you're on the other side of the teaching and learning spectrum, you want to learn and grow, right? And so everybody here, we make mistakes all at different points of our life in all areas. And so when you report somebody, for an instance, it's really a report to acknowledge to the institution, I want this student to learn, I want them to grow. And so where I come in my work at Columbia, and if it's GenAI in particular, right? If I have a classic kind of case of a student plagiarizing, and not just plagiarizing like the old school plagiarizing where we had students misattributing like sources and forgetting they're messy on, inserting their citations properly. Now it's fake citations. It's hallucinated content from wherever they pulled the resource from, which most times in academia, the most commonly used AI tool is ChatGPT, right? But students are using Claude, they're using Copilot if they're into mathematics. That does a better job at calculations than Chat does. Then, depending on whether your students are more arts-based, they're using a plethora of other kinds of tools. I mean, every single day, a brand new generative AI company crops up out in the larger working world and tries to sell us their content, right? And so I guess all I'm saying is on my side of the house is like, as an instructor, you get to take charge of how you want to integrate generative AI into the way you teach. And I think what's also hard about this is teaching. We teach, every time we teach a subject, the class even if you teach the same thing on repeat, it's never the same way that you teach it the first time, right? So the other part to this is trying to kind of level the playing field. Our students are obviously using GenAI, and it's not going to change. Like, it really won't, sadly. I think a lot of us at the very beginning of this boom in 2022 were like fearful, but I think now it's like, okay, if this is happening, how do I adjust my expectations? How do I measure outcome on student learning? How do I get people to connect with me? And how do I forbade it in certain parts of my teaching? Because there are definitely, what we don't want is students utilizing them during exams. It's like defeating the point, right? But there might be other creative ways to engage using it. So that's the both and side. But again, there are negatives to this conversation too, which we could also talk about.
I want to jump in real quick because you're right. It is a conversation that we should have with our students, and I feel the importance of having that conversation early on, the beginning, or even on day one, or even before day one, with your students on what is allowed, what is not allowed, and so those expectations should be transparent, even so on the syllabus, right? And so, what are some advice that we can give faculty members on, or guidelines on making those conversations much more because it could be really awkward maybe at times when you and not and like Johan mentioned, right? How do you approach a situation? I can imagine. I don't know how you both would do, right? Because you have to approach someone now you're accusing, and you're that fear of accusing somebody, and when it doesn't happen, when it wasn't really so I could see it being that conversation being very tricky.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's better to have that conversation and for it to be part of this difficult conversation. Like, I think what I've coached faculty through a lot of times is to say, let's say if I was this faculty member and Jose, you're my student, I would bring you in for an office hours conversation or a private kind of conversation to say, hey, I have how are you feeling like the class is going so far? Gauging kind of your interactions with the course and material. Are you an engaged student or are you a disengaged student? I think there's like two approaches to it. You do know as the instructor kind of like who's really in it and involved and invested, and you have some students that are just kind of there, but they're not really in it. And I think that that's partially some factors and reasons for why students can be dishonest. It's not intentional most of the time. I think a lot of it has to do with other things like interest in the course, how the course is taught. Does this really matter for my career? Do I have family obligations that are taking me away from my focus? Do I have a learning disability that I am struggling with? Is my mental health not so great right now? There's so many variables to this. But how I would bring you into the conversation is just saying, like, I have some concerns. Can you help me understand how you did this assignment? Like, walk me through your process, right? And I think it can go to the same thing with the person who wrote in the question, like the document revisioning under somebody writing like an essay. We haven't like mandated it all to faculty. Again, this is still your choice, your agency in determining what makes the best sense for you. But I often tell students as a preventative measure, use Google Docs. We are a Google institution here. So there's no reason why a student can't use it to then showcase in their revision history, like where things came from. Even better if you actually are using some of the like integrated tools like Citation Manager and other things to input like where you're cutting your resources and materials from. But it can it could be borderline surveilling, right? And I think that's a conversation that we haven't really unpacked a lot in academia, but I think it could be useful for students to show time of like how long they worked on something, right? Because if you can see like there was only one huge paste of content literally in a doc, well, that's kind of suspect. Like you can talk to your student about like, where did that come from? And I've heard all kinds of different examples, but what it boils down to is students are using different things to compile their work, right? So one example, I had a student who typed in a bunch of content on her notes section of her Apple like computer. Like the notes on our phone that you can just like type in your thoughts. She was doing that on a notes document. Now that's not tracked like a Google Doc, but then copied and pasted all that content into a Google Doc, then turned it in. But the professor, all they could see, because they were using this revisioning, it was the history professor, by the way, was using this content to see kind of where did the student come and pull this stuff up. They had a conversation and they got to the bottom of it. It didn't result in an integrity violation, but it resulted in a good conversation around managing your academic work in a clearer way. Because I still think our students have not been taught a really good methodical way of like citation management and sourcing. There's so much information, but they've not been taught a system of how to do it, which I think lies in partially some of the problem.
And I wanted to say something. I wanted to jump on something that you had talked about there, which is how you approach the students. And yeah, I never talk to them sort of in an accusatory way. I usually open up with the same kind of thing, like, hey, there's something here that's a little bit off. I really want to understand what's happening here. And in many cases, I would say most cases, if there's something truly off, the students will own up to it, and the conversation will end there, and I'll say something like, look, this is an academic integrity violation based on what we've seen here, but you're of course welcome to continue in my class. Like I think the tone really does matter. If you talk to them in a respectful manner and you sort of approach it from the right perspective, like students understand, and many of them will say, yeah, I didn't have time to study, I was tired. So there are many things happening in their lives that I think cause these situations to happen. I don't think of them as like malicious acts. So I think having the right tone when you talk to a student can be very helpful in these situations.
Are there some resources that we can point our students to? I know here at City Tech, I know we have, for example, the procrastination station, which is a website that sometimes students, will procrastinate, and in the last minute, like, oh my gosh, I got this paper due. Let me go to GenAI and just have it done. Or, or workshops. Maybe can you talk a little bit about some of these resources that we can point our students to avoid having to go that route?
I think Victoria, you get have more of you have like a course for this kind of thing, if I remember correctly.
Well, it's like an orientation module.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little bit different, but I would say, I can talk about that briefly, but maybe to directly answer, I think all of the resources that your institution already provides are the resources, right, to helping students connect. I'm I've been kind of always mulling through this like working theory about students, right? Like the past, I don't know, I've been at a couple different institutions at this point. I've been at Columbia the longest, but I was at UMass Amherst prior to that. I worked at Skidmore College. I did a short internship when I was a doctoral student at the New School, in a variety of places, right? But what has that taught me? It kind of just has taught me that, in essence, there's some universality to students and kind of how they operate. And I'm thinking about my student self as well, that I just think right now, as it stands, we don't really see a ton of engagement from students for the resources that they're paying for that are provided through the institution. There's like a huge block. I don't know what else to call it, but if you're a student on this call, I just want to speak directly to you and say, use the resources like the Writing Center. Every institution out here pretty much has an amazing writing center with dedicated staff, instructors, people who will help you get unstuck, literally from every point of iterating on the writing process. Like there's not a reason not to utilize the humans that work there. Now, of course, I will take the other side of the argument. Somebody will say, I have no time, I can't get to office hours, I can't physically go to the writing center. They don't offer Zoom appointments, what have you. We do it all those on the opposites to all of that. I think it's still a block for some students to accept help. And so the flip side to that, I often tell my students at Columbia, it's like, you're paying for a lot of this. So when you think about what you calculate per day to have an opportunity to sit in a seat in academia in your chosen institution to then learn, you're paying to learn. So you've already paid for the service. Use the service. It's connected to what you're offering. So students can get, for example, here, up to 1 hour, 2 1 hour slots for writing support. Now, do every student here take advantage of that? Absolutely not. They do not. But there's opportunity to get help from that, from our amazing librarians, our research librarians. I think are some of, I don't want to, I love my colleagues, but I think sometimes they're underutilized in our institutions, like with their areas of expertise. Many of them have the top degrees, are amazing, and many students don't realize that they can go to them to help them find resources, like good sources, and develop a rapport with them, kind of like the old school days when you could go to the stacks. I know some of you on the call would remember this when you were doing research, right? You would go to the library, go to the catalog, write down the call numbers, go up to the stacks, find other books that would relate that you hadn't even thought of, and maybe bring those books down with you to your space and flip through and find things. Now that everything's digitized, I still think students have large gaps in understanding how do they have that literacy and finding good information. Like this current population of students gets instant information now. It doesn't mean they're critical consumers of what they're looking at. And so that's the problem that I still juggle with, is like there are amazing resources, but I just think the human contact piece is hard for students since COVID, honestly.
We also have a writing center and math help center, and many of those options for students are just not utilizing them as much. And I think part of that is just their schedules are very, very difficult. The way they view taking courses from the students that I talk to in my classes is sort of very different from when I was an undergrad, right? When as a full-time student, I was taking 15 credits, right? They think of the students that I talk to sometimes will say, well, I'm taking 12 to 15 credits. That means I still have time to work, to have a full-time job or take care of a family. And so there's this idea that some of them are just not thinking of how much time is necessary outside of the classroom in order to really be a full-time student. And that is a problem that I really don't know how to solve. Just the amount of other things in their life that is occupying so much time. So that is I want them to use these resources, but some of them just simply don't have the time for it, and that is tough.
No, I mean, I think that's the biggest constraint every single student, even the faculty on this call have, is you have limited time in your day to do multitude of things that you need to take care of. And I think having worked with students from a variety of just different backgrounds, you have to be creative in figuring out what works, right? There are some days where maybe you're working late at night and other days are working in the morning hours, but I agree. I mean, I think that's the hardest juggle. is figuring out when are you most motivated to do the work and to find the resources that will help. I mean, I think in the interim where GenAI can be helpful and useful is there are lots of faculty and types of ed tech companies that are trying to develop different types of bots that would be an insert into like a learning management system that would allow for students to like answer questions. But again, all of this is has to be trained. You have to figure out ways in which you want to limit things. Because what we're seeing in the research, right, that more and more, everybody's probably seen the MIT study, or I hope you've seen the MIT study. I can look for the link and drop it in the chat in a little bit. But basically, they came out and said that when they did brain scans of students who were working on writing, they don't remember the writing that was generated and therefore put into papers because they didn't cognitively do the work. It was cognitively an offload to ChatGPT or insert whatever company replacing that at this point, that they can't recall it. And, you know, even doing some focus group conversations with students on this campus too, like I can say probably confidently the same thing. The learning process is supposed to be hard. And I think what GenAI has done is kind of usurped the power from learning and tried to place it off of like quick interactions where time is the crunch, right? Like people don't have time. I'm doing all these extra things and you don't have the liberty because time is a privilege to be able to sit with your books, to read, to properly take that information in and process it, and to go to these resource spaces. But in this new era, I think you're going to probably see a shift between virtual hours or text bots like in the middle of the night for people, right? In hopes that that would be useful. But again, it's so hard to say. I think what the new era of higher ed will look like is going to be very different too, I suspect. But yes, Jose, that's great. Thanks for dropping that publication about your brain on ChatGPT. It's not promising the actual results of the study of utilizing ChatGPT, which is kind of why I said at the very beginning, like we didn't ask, this LLM model wasn't created for academia too. I keep telling people that, like, it wasn't created for academics to use. And by all means, it's an amazing invention, and it can do some amazing things, right, to help people be efficient. But I think on the learning side, there's still some guardrails we need to put into place for how to best teach.
And I wanted to mention something that came up yesterday. We had a presentation by Pangram Labs here on detecting AI-generated text. And there was a really good student question at the end that said, if as we have this technology around longer and longer, eventually we're going to get to a point where everybody uses it. Will we even care if you can detect generative AI, which suggests that maybe in the long run, the question will even be, will students even think that this stuff is an academic integrity violation at all? Or will they think we're punishing them for doing something that they consider to be extremely normal? I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say too, right? Because I think even now you've got the first group of graduates graduating this year that had some iteration of generative artificial intelligence from the beginning of their time in college. This class of 2026 is going to be the first group that has seen kind of the ramp up of generative AI. But every group after that, it'll be, again, it's been here and they're playing around using it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think again, I think what this has forced us to do is to rethink everything of how we're presenting teaching and learning.
I see some hands are going up, so I think that's my cue to let's open up for some Q&A. I see Carol Harris has her hand up. Carol, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I wasn't certain if this was a Q&A at this point, but I'll so I'm in the English department at City Tech, and there's a wide range of views on apps like Grammarly. I teach a basic the 101 course, and in fact, I teach what's called 101 Co, so it's for students who need more practice for that course, and oftentimes a lot of students with English as not their first language. So I strictly forbid Grammarly as well because it's changed recently. It doesn't just fix grammar. The student can input the entire essay and even identify what tone they want, and it'll come out the other end. So they've been working on personal essays. I'll try to make this brief. And the students feel like the one student who did that and his rough draft, which was very bumpy, but so original and so expressive, what came out on the other side was so flattened. I felt so demoralized. I had the conversation with him and asked, I kind of had this conversation the way you're describing it. He immediately said, "Oh, yeah, I used it. But if I applied for a job the way that I write, I wouldn't get the job because it doesn't sound professional." So he thought his sort of cleaned up personal essay was professional. And recently we had two people from the Professional Development Center coming to our classes who are using that very language of how to become more professional, that present the students and how students can present themselves on this app called Handshake. So I think I'm not certain where my question is, but they're getting so much pressure to present themselves professionally that that's the conversation I have to have with my class, that this is a skills-based class, that as a writing teacher, I kind of need to know what they're doing in their own writing voice. And they might get other word from other kinds of professors, other kinds of classes. But in our case, I'm just disallowing it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so kind of is the question kind of like, how do you raise that distinguishing difference between that to your students, or can you share? Do you have a question in mind? Or
could I just say one thing? Because you were talking about the way that a professor teaches. I have always had as one of my key core values is requiring really students to go through a revision process.
Mhm.
And if it's a personal essay, I have seen just amazing work that even the most struggling student can, through a revision process, get to a point where they come to some kind of aha moment of why their story really matters. And so that's what AI, like, it used to be that students, I don't want to be like present myself as completely like obsolete, but it used to be that students would commit themselves, many students would commit themselves to that process. They'd get a low grade in the beginning. I'd always raise the grade as the paper got stronger, and they could feel that learning and that amazing, like they could feel real pride in what they produced after a process. So what I see now, especially in students who are in these very competitive majors, even in the first semester, they're so freaked out, which has always been the case, but so freaked out about grades that they just totally skip over that and reach to ChatGPT or Grammarly, something like that, to shortcut they don't go through a revision process at all. And so they produce a rough draft that might be ChatGPT, but what they produce in the end is just so flattened that I don't even know what to do with it. I mean, I have these conversations one-on-one in the office hours, very, very time consuming, very time intensive. Somebody put in the chat, makes me worried about adjuncts. Yes, I have many friends in English and adjuncts. It's like, I just don't have time for this. It's above my pay grade. So just let it go. And I can understand that. Yeah, I'll stop.
No, but I mean, I think your stance is an important one. I mean, I think every professor who teaches, and you have what we do at Columbia as part of our policy is we allow the faculty member to choose at what level are they going to integrate Gen AI at no part in their class. And that's stated up front from the students to say, I don't want to see generative AI content in your work. Or there's others who are utilizing pieces of it in different forms of assessment, right? So if it's don't know, problem sets, for example, in a course, or if it's in a writing-based course, they may use it to help you kind of jumpstart ideas. That's what we're seeing, but less about the actual content of the written, expressive kind of ways of how your students write. And I think that's the shame part about AI, honestly, Carol. I can relate a lot to what you're saying is it does flatten content. It makes everything kind of generic, and that's kind of a telltale sign of generative AI content. But the part about professionalism, we've been having conversations with our Center for Career Education here about like, how do we have students utilize the AI tool to, yes, make themselves professional, because that is a dilemma, right, that students are facing, particularly students who have and speak multiple languages. There's always that fear for some of them that they don't sound as native speaking as somebody who speaks the dominant language, right? And so there's a little bit of that in there. But I think it's just a constant conversation that we should be having with students about how do you present yourself authentically is kind of how I like to tell students. Is how do you bring all of who you are? Because these are strengths, not necessarily weaknesses. And I think, we take so much of a dominant top-down approach in kind of what we call professional these days that there's so many other powers people can have in serving, the workplace. In a more authentic way, right? So, yeah.
If I may, I can jump on that too. There's two things that popped to my mind when you, Carol, from what you said. We there is the obsession with grades, and I've always the last discussion, the last AI discussion series we had, Lucy Appert from NYU, and she did talk a little bit about that, how how there might be programs where it's so competitive, especially in the medical field, especially at Columbia. When I was there, I remember it was very competitive, and students are competing with each other in grades. Grades are the focus, and so a lot of the times that can lead to using these tools. But also, you mentioned professionalism, and from the professional perspective, when you see the employers are using systems like ATS to scan resumes, and they're looking for certain keywords, that also encourages students to say, hey, I gotta use GenAI to write my resume because it's going to write in a way that the ATS system is going to scan the resume, and I'm most likely going to get picked from this, hundreds of applicants. So, they're also looking at it from that perspective, from, I'm going to get a job, I need to get that job. But also, you also made an excellent point, Carol, because they have to eventually be able to speak and talk and write, right? Because, if you were so turned off by that student's paper, imagine the employer who was expecting the student to be able to use soft skills to, deliver an elevator pitch or to articulate your ideas for the company. So it still boils down to these basic skills that you need to know and learn by the time you get out of these 4 years in college. So anyway, I'll stop there. I see another hand up. Johan, go ahead. Sorry.
So I wanted to say something about, for example, choosing to ban these tools from your course, I think can make sense from the perspective of what is the course for. So, for example, I teach a 1000 level programming course, and the students could certainly use something like GitHub Copilot to do everything for them. But at some point in time, they have to do this without the tool to learn something. Sure, these tools are available in a professional setting for them to like excel in the workplace, but they have to learn it at some point in time. And so banning the tool at the 1000 level course means that I'm trying to get them to actually learn how to code before they start then using these tools to augment their work. And so from that perspective, I have absolutely no problem with banning these tools at that level. Now, as they go up, can you incorporate these things in order to generate, as kind of said, more professional type of things? That's fine. I think that's an okay idea, particularly if you already know that they've reached a certain level. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to say your aim is to have them learn this particular skill from the beginning, how to express themselves, how to code, how to whatever, and you don't want to have tools getting in the way of that process.
Thank you, Johan. I believe Professor Gaddari wants to has a question.
Hello.
Hi, Professor.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for providing this space. I really appreciate it. I have two questions. I'm very happy to see a math professor on this panel. I'm running the math department at Gottman Community College, and we have our own specific difficulties with a student using AI. And in terms of academic integrity, we also have different challenges as far as how can my faculty come to me and say, I know the student used AI. Let's say the homework assignments. We used to have online homework assignment, and there is a big gap between student grade on the homework and on the exam. So you can tell that assignments are done by AI, but there is no way to prove it. So we have our own specific challenges in math. And my first question is that I am interested to hear how math department at City Tech has been handling these challenges. And one more thing I wanted to say is that we have a lot of statistics sections. And even though we are shifting toward giving exam on paper to avoid some of these challenges, still it's not possible because a student needs to use statistical software during the exam. Anything during that class, they need to use a statistical software. So they need to have a laptop, they have access to it. So it's very difficult. We cannot avoid it. It's there. So I would like to know how math department has handled this in your university. My second question relates to CUNY online program. We have we developed two programs with CUNY online program. And as a result, we have math courses that are part of that program. And this program was developed prior to AI advancement. And at the time, these classes were designed in asynchronous modality. So now we have these online math classes and also biology, other classes, but some which hugely, I can tell hugely AI is used. So there is no way that we can monitor anything because it's completely asynchronous. And I heard that one of the suggestion was having a conversation with a student, directing them to resources. But unfortunately, when I teach those classes, there is there is there is no real contact between me and a student. And I offer office hours. I encourage everyone to come to office hours, but for some reason they stick to email, send a lot of emails. So I understand that when the class is in person, we are more in touch with a student. It is easier to send them to a math center, easier to send them to a, but when in CUNY online program, and my concern is that CUNY wants to expand online program. And I already see a lot of challenges in our department. And I'm worried that if CUNY pushes for more online program, more online math classes, then first, how can we ensure academic integrity in that environment? And second, how can we support the student? So I would appreciate if you can give me your input on this.
All right. Well, I am from the math department, and I'll give you maybe a little bit of what I do, but I'll say right now that I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire math department. We have several faculty members in the chat right now, and I'm certain that they have ideas as well. I would say, yeah, we use an online homework system for a lot of our courses, web work as well. And what I've mostly done at this point is severely reduced the overall grade value of online or any type of homework, really. So there's a very nice article on the New York Times that I think I can paste in the chat that talks about like solutions to this problem, which is essentially to go to Blue Books. So in my courses, they're heavily weighed towards the things that you do in class. So, for example, if someone decides that they want to use AI on every part of the web work, then they can get 100% on 10% of the course. If they can't perform any of that on the exam, then they'll still get a poor grade. So in that situation, the web work is there to encourage them to really learn, and then if they can excel in the exams and the homework, they'll get a good grade. But if they really rely on it for just one thing, they're not going to do. They usually don't do well in the course. So that's what I've attempted to do, which is effectively what this article talks about, right? Using Blue Books, doing things in person, right? Going back to the old ways of doing things. In terms of purely online courses, this is a really hard challenge, and it's not just math, right? History is one of the departments that I think has purely asynchronous online courses here, and that is a big problem. That is a tough question. I think it was suggested at some point in time that maybe you could have online classes but in-person exams, but there's a lot of difficulty with doing that. Just space, students not being accustomed to showing up to a physical location to take an exam. Doing things via software, like preventing cheating via software, can be very invasive, and I know that was a big problem, I think, during the pandemic. So that's the online asynchronous problem is huge, and I don't like doing this, but I don't know the answer to that one. If I did, I'd be screaming it from the rooftops. So.
And I'm the director of academic technologies and online learning at City Tech. So that's the biggest challenge for me is the asynchronous component. Professor Deal mentioned tools like lockdown browsers, that could be invasive, or tools that have the camera turned on that's recording the student while the student is completing the exam, and very invasive. And so it's a $1 million question, and you asked it. And this is why I love these conversations, because we all come from different institutions, and I know we're all struggling with the same problems. And it really took a hit for us as for online asynchronous courses. To me now, I start thinking about more hybrid teaching, where a combination of online async or online sync with a mix of in-person classroom. But again, we don't have the answers. These are great questions. Yeah.
I mean, the one other thing I'll say too is that, students, when you talk to them about why they're using generative AI, many of them are saying, I need a tutor, right? Or I need somebody to help me explain something that I can't go to the professor for, or I can't meet them during office hours, or I need to watch a video. And it's not even just Chat GPT and others, it's still YouTube, right? I mean, we've been in this era of consuming learning-based content online for a long time. I just think that we've sometimes struggle with figuring out like the best approach based off of like how you want to teach it. And I often tell faculty, like, again, this is so variable depending on the course and what they're teaching, identifying for yourself what would be a good learning tool for students to use when they can't come to you. Like, when I taught too, like I would keep at the top of my syllabus, like these are the best resources for you to access, not the World Wide Web to find anything that remotely relates to the topic that I'm teaching about, right? Like helping push them to these resources are allowed, these ones are not allowed. And if you give them that, because every student, of course, the default brain mindset is, I want the A, right? Because that's what they're trying to get. And so if you can understand that too at the same time, and then like maybe try to give them a couple of crumbs towards these are the right ones to use, or, here are some extra problem sets and things, that really helps kind of move them along. But the dilemma is real. Like it's hard. The struggle is real on kind of the asynchronous model. It's kind of creating as you go. We're in an environment where we're making things up as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also add to that online asynchronous courses are not for everyone. And some students might not understand what entails to take a course that they're not ready mentally or not prepared or have never taken an online asynchronous course, before, and they have no idea what they're expected to do, because in an online asynchronous course, they don't have a professor right in front of their face. They can have the luxury of asking questions, or, having students around them or being in the campus itself where all the resources are. So you're kind of like at a little island, you're kind of a little separated from the campus experience where all those resources exist. And so you have to be able to be a problem solver. You have to have good time management skills. Not all students have those skills. So, it might be needed, or there might be some kind of survey that you can have for your students to complete before they sign up for or enroll for an online asynchronous class. That's all I can think of.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to quickly say that in CUNY online program, unfortunately, when you develop courses for them, the course belongs to them. So the course doesn't belong to our department, our college. So we don't have permission to change the modality. It is already made asynchronous. We can, unfortunately, this is done before AI. And since we don't have ownership of these courses, we cannot make any changes. And I think this is a bigger issue which needs to be discussed with people who run CUNY online program. It is beyond our colleges. I just have a quick follow-up question. Talking about putting more weight on the exam and in-person class activities rather than online homework. I have a question because when I teach statistics, on the exam they need to use software, and no matter how much I go around the class, I still catch a student on another browser having ChatGPT. And last semester one student got B plus on the exam, and then I accidentally find another browser, and the entire exam was in ChatGPT. So the student got zero and failed the course. But it's not possible to police the class and check it. It's absolutely not possible. Is there I don't know if there is a CUNY, is there any CUNY-wide policy that perhaps we can block student access? Let's say if they have to use laptop, if they have to use this statistical software, then their access would be blocked to go to any other website. Do you have something like this at City Tech?
Yeah.
Is it allowed?
Yeah, so we have the tool, which is a lockdown browser, like that it would prevent the student from, right. So but we require that the faculty member includes that language in the syllabus so that students are aware that this tool will be used in the class. And so we do have that, but again, you just have to make sure that you have it on your syllabus and the students are aware that this is the procedure for when taking an exam. You're gonna go on a computer. It's gonna lock down your browser. You won't be able to open new tabs. You won't be able to, you're stuck to wherever that test is. If it's on Brightspace, you can't move out of there. So we do have that, yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
This might be challenge. This is sometimes also my problem because we use software in some of the tests that I give, and it is unfortunately cloud-based service. So even you'd have to come up with some unique set of restrictions, I think, to make that happen. What I gathered was that maybe this is the case. You're talking about software that is installed locally on your machine, on those machines, and is not accessing the internet. Is that so? So maybe a lockdown browser would work here, but it can be challenging with cloud-based services.
Right. And with that it goes back to what Professor Gadari mentioned is you're policing, and so our previous AI roundtable talk, we talked about reimagining the traditional assessment, and we talked about some ideas of and we have Professor Sean Scanlon from City Tech, and we have Professor Lucy Appert from NYU. If you did miss that one, that's a good one. We had a professor come in and display, an assignment that he had reimagined to encourage students to have much more authentic responses, critical thinking and and so forth. And he did allow the use of AI in that course. So if you did miss that one, you can find it in our YouTube channel. If there aren't any more questions, I think we're at 12:32. If anyone has any more last minute questions before Victoria goes away and Johan. No?
There was a hand by Tanya I saw, but I don't know if
Tanya, you want to go ahead, Tanya?
I wasn't going to ask a question so much as to bring up the idea of, or what has already been raised about asynchronous as definitely a model that right now for students, not just because of AI, but also because of peer-to-peer interaction, which is a vital component of learning in our estimation. So in the communication design department here at City Tech, almost none of our classes are asynchronous, with the exception of a couple capstones. And in fact, and I'm internship course coordinator in my department, and in fact, that had moved to, we always had an asynchronous, even pre-pandemic, we had hybrid, and we had asynchronous internship over the summer, just because of the compression of the summer classes. And we've pulled back from asynchronous for all students and put in a permissions requirement on that, precisely because there is a great difference in development of who can handle that at that level. And I'm finding the permission requirement is excellent for that. In other words, you can't enroll without permission, and that permission comes from us, and we determine it based on preparation through reviewing their work, their portfolio, as well as their resume, and talking with them and getting some idea. Then you get a sense of who can go into asynchronous and who cannot. And that permission is given. And I feel like that is one way, but I still think, even within that, that the value of having peer-to-peer conversation in the internship class, so they share what's happening at their work sites, and that can be done online, synchronously on Zoom, is a piece that is missed, even for those students that do go into the asynchronous. And so I do have that conversation with them, letting them know if they go in, and you can go in, that is a piece you will miss. It's not, and so many of our students, building the network is what they really need. A strong network coming out is a very big help to you in whatever field you're pursuing. And so there's a loss there. And I think that's what needs to be an advisement piece. I think this is an advisement question is what I'm getting to. That students need to go to their faculty advisors and really talk to them about the modalities and what's the best choice. My personal favorite, especially as students mature, is hybrid. And that can be hybrid in person, asynchronous, hybrid on Zoom, and asynchronous, because as students are older, they can handle that kind of balance, and it helps them with their schedules, particularly for our students who work outside the classroom. So that's the feedback I had on that. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's helpful too, Tanya, too, because the working world is very hybrid now too, right? So as students get familiar with that, the working world's like that too. So if they can show responsibility in that and can really learn, I think it makes sense. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, when I think about this conversation, is we still want students to be authentic learners, and I think that's the issue that I think GenAI hits a nerve on, is how real has what we taught them, like, was that real? Does it sink in? Are they being transformed? Because when we think about what education is about, it's about transforming our students. They're not the same people that they came to us from the very first class to when they actually end. If they haven't changed, then we have failed at our job as educators, right? And we want them to be reiterative and thinking and consistently like extending and being lifelong learners. That's what this is, yes, you get your credential and your degree from your institution, but we want to encourage lifelong learning. by having people go through the pipeline of higher ed in whatever shape or form, whether that's an associate's or whether that's a bachelor's and beyond. That's at least my belief. And I still feel like GenAI can't take that away, but we as educators in the space in the room have to kind of, again, to use Jose's word, reimagine how we're doing that. And I think that's what's so hard. We've tied ourselves tethered to kind of older ways, but some of the older ways I think will stay and other things will have to kind of reconfigure. But I think we can figure it out. But again, it's a long-term process. We move slow in higher ed. So, maybe we'll get there eventually.
That's well said, transformational. I think that's a what better way to end this talk. That was perfect. Real quick before we close, I do want to mention that I will be back at 1 o'clock. There's one more workshop coming up, and if you're interested, stop by. We're going to be doing assessment agents in action. So again, we're going to go back into AI. That's at 1 o'clock if you're interested. And one more announcement, the next AI Roundtable talk, like Victoria mentioned, we have the Writing Center from City Tech will be there, along with I believe it's Washington College Writing Center will also join us for that talk. So feel free to join us for those talks. I want to thank Johan Thiel and Victoria Melanie Brown for taking their time. You guys were phenomenal. I really thank you for taking the time of your busy schedule, joining us and talking to us about academic integrity. So thank you both and everyone else who joined us. Carol, you have one thing to say real quick?
It's just about the next Zoom at 1. I made a note that I signed up for reimagining traditional assessments. Is that the same as what you were?
In this workshop, we're actually going to create agents hands-on. So if you're interested in creating an agent for your course, then we're moving from academic integrity straight to the agents.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.